On a desolate stretch of Highway 74 in Oklahoma, on a dark and cold November night in 1974, one of the biggest mysteries of our time began with a single car accident. The lone occupant was found dead at the scene, sparking questions that still echo today. What seemed like a tragic accident soon unraveled into one of the most controversial and chilling cases in American history. Secrets, suspicions, and hidden agendas surrounded the life and untimely death of the woman inside that car. This is the story of America's first whistleblower, a story shadowed by deception and unanswered questions. This is the story of Karen Silkwood. Hello friends, my name is Marcia, and this is Midwest Murders. The source of information for the details of this case have come directly from the FBI and police files. These are statements and recollections given in the immediate aftermath of the accident and sometimes differ from later news accounts. Karen Silkwood was born in Nederland, Texas, the oldest of 3 daughters. Her father, Bill Silkwood, worked as a union paint contractor, and her mother, Merle, was a bank teller. She had 2 younger sisters, Rosemary and Linda. As a child, she enjoyed riding her bike and playing tennis. At Nederland High School, Karen played the flute in the band, was on the volleyball team, and was a member of the Future Homemakers of America. Academically, she excelled, becoming a member of the National Honor Society and one of only 22 honor students in her graduating class of 1964. Known for her meticulous note-taking, she earned a scholarship from the Business and Professional Women's Club, which helped pay her expenses at Lamar College in Beaumont. In 1965, after 1 year of college, Karen dropped out to elope with Bill Meadows, a young man she had met the previous summer while visiting her grandparents. The couple initially traveled to Louisiana to get married, but unable to do so due to Bill's age, they returned to Texas, claiming they had, in fact, gotten married. They eventually moved to Corsicana, Texas, where Bill secured a job as a machinist at Mobil Oil. Together, Karen and Bill had 3 children. However, after 7 years of common-law marriage, Bill began an affair with a co-worker from a motorcycle shop where he moonlighted. Devastated by his infidelity, Karen decided to leave him. Believing that her children would be better cared for with their father, she made the difficult decision to leave them and set off for Oklahoma, where she had heard the Kerr-McGee plant was hiring. On August 3, 1972, Karen was hired as a laboratory analyst at the Kerr-McGee Corporation's Nuclear Products Division in Crescent, Oklahoma, a facility licensed by the Atomic Energy Commission. At the time of her death, she was working in the plutonium section of the lab, handling materials critical to nuclear energy. Shortly after joining the company, Karen became involved in union activities. She became a member of the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Union, local number 5283. Just 3 months into her job, she joined the picket line during a union strike. Although the strike ended in failure, with the company making no concessions after 10 weeks, Karen's commitment to the union deepened. She was elected to the bargaining committee, becoming the first woman to hold that position. During her time at Kerr-McGee, Karen became romantically involved with a co-worker, Drew Stevens, who was also deeply involved in union activities. They lived together in Oklahoma City until September 1974, when a fight led Karen to move out. She moved to an apartment at 908 North Washington in Edmond, Oklahoma, where she lived with Sherry Ellis, another Kerr-McGee analyst. Despite some reports suggesting they were close friends, Sherry later told the FBI that they didn't know each other very well and hardly saw one another due to their different work shifts. By the summer of 1974, Karen and several of her co-workers began noticing troubling changes at the Kerr-McGee Cimarron facility. There seemed to be a production speed-up, which they believed led to a decline in safety standards and quality control. Additionally, the plant faced high personnel turnover, with a rate of about 35%, due in part to long shifts, often 12 hours, and changes from day to night shift on short notice. Obviously, such a turnover rate caused the experience and skill level of the workforce to decline, further intensifying safety concerns. Karen started taking notes on these issues, becoming increasingly obsessed with the conditions at the facility. Amid these growing concerns, the local union was fighting for its survival. A campaign to decertify the union at the Cimarron plant had gained momentum, and an election to determine whether the union would continue representing workers was scheduled for October 16th. In the face of this, Karen and two other union committee members, Jack Tice and Gerald Brewer, flew to Washington, D.C. on September 26th to meet with national officials of the union. With their contracts set to expire on December 1st, they needed support to address mounting health and safety concerns at the plant. Kerr-McGee had a history of hardline opposition to unions, having endured a bitter 6-month strike at its uranium mines in New Mexico the previous year. Tensions between the company and the union were already high, making this meeting critical for the union's future. The September meeting in Washington was primarily focused on health and safety issues at the Cimarron plant. This was a regular meeting, similar to one held a month earlier regarding the Kerr-McGee facility in Erwin, Tennessee. Karen and her colleagues discussed several charges related to safety, but no allegations regarding faulty fuel rods were brought up at this time. The following day, Karen and her fellow union members met with officials from the Atomic Energy Commission, accompanied by Steve Wodka, the legislative assistant for the National Union. They repeated their concerns about safety at the Cimarron facility. During this meeting, Wodka casually mentioned that plutonium was believed to cause cancer, an alarming revelation for the Cimarron delegation, who had never been informed of this crucial health risk. While Karen later became known for exposing allegations about faulty fuel rods, it remains unclear when these concerns were first raised. The other Cimarron union representatives present at the Washington meetings insisted to the FBI that the fuel rod allegations were not discussed in September. They were unaware that Karen had made separate complaints regarding the quality control of the fuel rods and had no knowledge that she intended to take further action on those issues. It's important to note that Karen's exposure to radioactive contamination had already been an ongoing issue before the events of November 1974. On the night of July 31st, while working the overnight 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. shift in the emission spectrographic laboratory at the Cimarron facility, 2 air sample filters indicated that radioactive material had escaped into the room between 4 p.m. and midnight. As a result, Karen was required to submit weekly urine and fecal samples to monitor her exposure. However, these samples were not collected in a controlled or supervised manner, allowing Karen to submit them on her own, an irregularity that persisted throughout her later contamination events. On the evening of November 5th, after finishing her 4 p.m. to midnight shift, Karen was found to have a low level of radioactive contamination. Following company protocol, she underwent a decontamination procedure at the plant, which involved scrubbing with a heavy detergent and bleach solution. After being cleared of contamination, Karen left the facility and returned to her apartment. The next morning, on November 6th, Karen returned to work for the 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. shift. At approximately 9:30 a.m., she discovered a slight degree of external contamination during a self-check. More alarmingly, her fecal sample from that day showed a significant level of radioactivity, indicating that Karen had likely ingested plutonium or a plutonium-uranium mixture. X-ray diffraction studies of the materials in her urine sample revealed traces of uranium-205, an isotope not typically associated with the plutonium that Karen worked with. This anomaly raised immediate suspicions within Kerr-McGee and the Atomic Energy Commission. The company and the Atomic Energy Commission began to suspect that Karen's urine and fecal samples, which she submitted unsupervised, had been deliberately laced with radioactive material. Nonetheless, Karen underwent decontamination once again and was instructed to report to the Health Physics Department at the Cimarron facility the following morning for further examination. The following morning, November 7th, Karen went directly to the Health Physics building for her scheduled checkup. She did not enter the plutonium plant that day, yet tests revealed that she was contaminated once again. Since she hadn't been in contact with radioactive materials at the plant, it was believed that the contamination might have been acquired outside of work. This examination also revealed internal contamination, an escalation of her earlier tests, which had only shown external contamination. Later that day, a team of specialists from Kerr-McGee's Health Physics Department inspected Karen's apartment in Edmond. They discovered high levels of surface contamination throughout the apartment, particularly in the bathroom and the refrigerator. The The team removed all furniture and personal belongings from the apartment for decontamination, and several items, including 2 partially smoked marijuana cigarettes and a section of a marijuana plant, were stored in a safe location at the Cimarron facility due to their radioactive contamination. Karen's roommate Sherry had worked an earlier shift and tested negative for contamination when she left the plant. However, upon testing after the inspection, she was found to be contaminated and taken to Kerr-McGee for decontamination. Karen would later tell the Atomic Energy Commission that she had spilled some of her urine in the bathroom, which likely caused the contamination. After cleaning up the spill, she had gone to the refrigerator for bologna to make her lunch, again the most likely source of the contamination. On November 11th and 12th, Karen, along with her boyfriend Drew and roommate Sherry, were sent to Los Alamos, New Mexico for more advanced medical tests. During this time, Karen became convinced that someone was deliberately trying to contaminate her and that she was going to die from the exposure. However, after undergoing extensive testing, Dr. George Volz, the health division leader at Los Alamos, reassured Karen that she was not in immediate danger. The tests showed no lung burden, and her contamination levels were deemed non-lethal. This news lifted her spirits, and Karen felt more hopeful about her condition. On November 13th, Karen, who had just returned from Los Alamos, went to work at the Cimarron facility, but never actually went on the job. She participated in a union negotiation session with the company, which lasted most of the day. She stayed in this meeting until about 3:30 and then met with the Atomic Energy Commission representatives at the plant, staying with them until 5 or 5:30. They were trying to find out how she had become contaminated. Karen, with a co-worker in her passenger seat, then went to nearby Crescent to attend a union meeting at the Hub Cafe. This co-worker would later tell the FBI that they each had their rough notes on the union demands against the company. This individual did not see any briefcase or large file of paper or documents in Karen's car and did not recall seeing any items that may have been related to her allegations concerning quality control at the Cimarron plant. An unidentified co-worker at that meeting later told the FBI that Karen told her she was going to meet Steve Wodka and David Burnham, a reporter for the New York Times, at the Holiday Inn Northwest in Oklahoma City at 8 p.m. concerning the alleged falsification of quality control records at the plant. Karen told her that she was disappointed that the information she was going to pass on to the reporter lacked quality. Karen also mentioned that she was going through a deep depression brought on by her contamination, and she was seeing a psychologist in Oklahoma City. 2 other co-workers who were at that union meeting reported that they were concerned about Karen's ability to drive in light of her extreme emotional condition, which they believed was caused by her concern about her contamination. They both offered to drive her home, but Karen turned down the offers, leaving the meeting shortly after 7 p.m. No one at the union meeting recalled Karen having any alcohol to drink, as alcohol at union meetings was strictly forbidden. Later that evening, at approximately 8 p.m., a 14-year-old boy and his uncle were driving a 1-ton flatbed truck north on Highway 74 toward Crescent. A friend of theirs was traveling ahead in a pickup truck. Both vehicles were returning home from a remodeling job in Oklahoma City. The uncle, a wrecker driver, noticed a reflection off the east side of the highway and stopped, flashing his headlights to signal the pickup truck. Thinking the flatbed had a problem, the pickup turned around and returned to the scene. As the uncle backed up the flatbed to light the ditch with its headlights, the young boy saw what appeared to be a hand sticking out of a windshield onto the hood of a car that was lying in the culvert. When the uncle took a closer look, he realized there was a body in the car. The pickup driver, who hadn't noticed the wreck initially, drove to the closest payphone, which was located outside a closed grocery and gas station at the intersection of Highways 74 and 33, to call the highway patrol. He returned to the scene about 10 minutes later. Soon after, Kerr-McGee employees Law Goodwin and Fred Sullivan were also traveling north on Highway 74 when they came across the scene. They noted the wrecked car, a white Honda Civic, would not have easily been visible from the highway for the passing cars. Upon examining the car with a flashlight, Goodwin discovered a white female, motionless, in the driver's seat. The steering wheel had pressed her against the ceiling, and dried blood covered her face, indicating the accident had happened earlier. Goodwin suspected it was his co-worker Karen Silkwood, but couldn't be certain due to her injuries. He advised against moving the car or disturbing the scene until law enforcement arrived. He noticed a woman's purse on the ground near the car, which he insisted remain untouched until the police arrived. At 8:05 p.m., Oklahoma Highway Patrol Trooper Rick Fagan, working the 4 to midnight shift, was notified of an accident with injuries on Highway 74, 7 miles south of Crescent. He immediately requested an ambulance and arrived on the scene at 8:15. Upon his arrival, he found Karen's white Honda Civic laying on its left side between the sides of a culvert on the east side of the road. The car had sustained extensive damage, particularly to the front end, which had been driven back into the passenger compartment, pinning Karen against the ceiling. Her legs were broken and her face was covered in dried blood. It was clear that the accident had occurred approximately 45 minutes earlier, around 7:30 p.m. Trooper Fagan, along with the uncle and the pickup driver, worked to turn the car over. At this point, Goodwin confirmed that the deceased was indeed Karen Silkwood. The Guthrie Fire Department's ambulance arrived shortly after, and the crew had to use an air jack to open the driver's side door and extract her body. No one on the scene recalled seeing any papers laying about, as has been suggested in reports. Trooper Fagan's investigation concluded that Karen had been traveling south on Highway 74 at approximately 50 to 55 miles an hour when her car left the road at a shallow angle, continuing for 255 feet in the ditch before striking the culvert's retaining wall. There were no skid marks, indicating Karen made no effort to stop or correct the car's course. The tire tracks in the ditch were straight and uninterrupted, showing no sign that she fought for control of the vehicle. Just before impact, the tracks veered slightly toward the road, suggesting a brief attempt to correct the car's path. The cause of the crash remained unclear, although it was determined that neither her lap belt nor her shoulder harness were in use at the time. This was confirmed by the pickup driver, who also noticed that the tire marks in the ditch were straight and uninterrupted and continued on for quite a while. He felt there were other options available to Karen had she been awake. One was that she could have continued into the field or had ample time to return to the road. Inside the car, Trooper Fagan found 2 stacks of papers related to Kerr-McGee's union bargaining session, along with personal items like photographs and a red spiral notebook. Karen's body was taken to Logan County Hospital in Guthrie for an autopsy. Dr. Robert Ringrose conducted the examination, determining that the cause of death was multiple injuries, including facial, chest, and bilateral leg fractures. He also found that Karen had methaqualone, commonly known as Quaaludes, in her system, a sedative prescribed to her for neck pain following a previous accident. A trace of ethyl alcohol was also detected, possibly from a glass of wine Karen had the night before. Karen's Honda Civic was heavily damaged, especially in the front end. The left side of the car, including the door and quarter panel, were severely dented and wrinkled, with damage to the right rear as well. The front windshield had been knocked out, and the roof buckled from the impact. The damage to the rear bumper later fueled conspiracy theories, suggesting that she may have been run off the road. However, Harold Smith, an employee of Sebring Ford, which was dispatched to tow the vehicle, stated that the rear bumper might have been damaged during the process of pulling the car from the culvert. He recalled the left rear quarter panel being pressed against the wing wall of the culvert at one point, which may have contributed to the rear end damage. At the time of the accident, Highway 74, a 2-lane asphalt highway with a painted center divided line, had 4 feet wide shoulders on both sides that were smooth, well maintained, and at the same level as the road surface. Farm fields extended past the shoulders. Visibility extended for half a mile along the road, with no nearby residences or businesses. The road's rural location, combined with the time of day and lack of lighting, added to the eerie isolation of the accident scene. Within hours of Karen's car being taken to the Sebring garage, Kerr-McGee officials requested access so they could check the car for radiation. The Oklahoma Highway Patrol, a Crescent police officer, and Ted Sebring were present when this check was done and indicated that the Kerr-McGee officials checked the car and left without taking anything out of the car other than a sample of a red substance which was in a plastic container. Later that day, Trooper Fagan was at Sebring's garage when Wodka and Stevens showed up. Prior to even examining the car, they stated they felt Karen had been run off the road. Stevens took possession of the car and its contents, which had been placed in an oil box. Included in that box were 2 Kerr-McGee soft cover binders containing typed spiral-bound documents and a small spiral notebook. The union, believing foul play was involved, hired accident reconstructionist A.O. Pipkin Jr. of Accident Reconstruction Lab in Dallas. He conducted his investigation on Saturday, November 16th, and reported there was evidence that Karen's car was hit from behind by another vehicle, causing her car to leave the road and hit the concrete culvert. He based his opinion on the fresh dent on the left rear bumper of her car and the configuration of the skid marks on the grassy left bank of the highway. His theory was in direct conflict with the physical evidence, and his official report was never provided to the FBI. An interesting bit of information that I have never heard publicly, but was contained in the FBI report, was that on October 31st, just 2 weeks before her death, at 1:15 a.m., 3.8 miles west of Guthrie on State Highway 33, Karen's car went off the highway backwards, going over a 13-foot embankment and coming to rest against a fence post. The police were not called. Instead, Karen left the car in the ditch until morning and contacted Martin's Wrecker Service in Guthrie, who extracted the vehicle from the ditch. Records provided by the Allstate Insurance Company showed that Karen had made a claim and they had authorized replacing the rear bumper, right tail light, rear gravel deflector, and repairing damage to the right quarter panel. This repair work had not been done prior to her fatal accident. Kerr-McGee has always maintained that the first they were aware of Karen's allegations was from newspaper publicity generated by her death. They have also maintained that at the time of her death, they were completely unaware that she had scheduled a meeting with a New York Times reporter. They were also not aware that Karen had collected documents which supposedly related to the alleged safety problems at the Cimarron facility and allegations concerning falsification of documents for fuel rods. They were aware that some fuel rod paperwork and negatives had been altered. An internal investigation by Kerr-McGee and the Atomic Energy Commission located the responsible employee who stated he had altered the information in order to make production quotas. He was subsequently fired prior to Karen's death. We do know that during her meeting with the Atomic Energy Commission on September 27th, she and her fellow union reps charged that the facility had failed to train and educate workers in the proper handling of plutonium, failed to keep exposure as low as possible, failed to adequately monitor workers' exposure and take the required hygienic precautions. A specific allegation was that training had gradually been reduced from 5 full days to 2 4-hour classes. In order to address some of the conspiracy theories around Karen's death, it's important to separate fact from speculation. A major point of contention involves the documents Karen was said to have at the time of her death. Some claim these documents, which supposedly contained incriminating evidence against Kerr-McGee, went missing after the accident. While it's unclear if any documents were actually lost, we do know that both Oklahoma Highway Patrol officers and wrecker personnel observed papers and notebooks in Karen's car after the crash. Kerr-McGee representatives who checked the car for radiation at Sebring's garage also saw these papers. Statements from Trooper Fagan, the garage owner, and union members who were with Karen earlier on the day of the accident consistently described the papers as union notes. These documents were boxed up and released to Drew Stevens and Steve Wodka. Later, some individuals claimed they had seen Karen with a large folder or envelope at the union meeting. However, these reports surfaced much later, adding to the uncertainty surrounding these documents. Another theory suggests that the delay between the time of the accident, which was approximately 7:30 p.m., and the arrival of police at 8:15 p.m., provided Kerr-McGee with an opportunity to remove damning evidence. However, this theory seems unlikely given the circumstances. The accident was only discovered by the driver of a flatbed truck because of his elevated vantage point. This was confirmed by multiple people who drove past the scene without noticing the wreck, including the flatbed driver's friend in the pickup truck and Kerr-McGee employees Law Goodwin and Fred Sullivan. Without the flatbed driver's specific perspective, the wreck might have gone unnoticed for a much longer period. There have also been claims that many Kerr-McGee employees were at the accident scene. Reports from Trooper Fagan and bystanders, however, indicate only 4 to 6 people were present at the time, not counting ambulance and wrecker service employees. Given that Kerr-McGee was the largest employer in Crescent, it's likely that some of the bystanders would have been Kerr-McGee employees, but the notion that the site was swarmed with company personnel seems exaggerated. Finally, some have speculated that Karen's contamination and safety concerns prior to her death alarmed Kerr-McGee, potentially leading to her being silenced. However, the company had 73 contamination incidents over 4 years. While Karen's case was serious, it's doubtful that that alone would have caused the company such significant concern. The contamination was not an isolated event in Kerr-McGee's history, and its safety record was known to the Atomic Energy Commission. So it is more likely they viewed it as part of the risks inherent in their operation, rather than a singular threat to the company. They were also well aware, as was the Atomic Energy Commission, about the falsification of fuel rod quality control reports and had terminated the responsible employee. In the years following Karen's tragic death, her family sued the Kerr-McGee Corporation, not for their alleged role in her accident, but for their negligence that led to her contamination with plutonium. Initially, they were awarded $10 million, but the case was later settled for $1.3 million. The lawsuit focused on Kerr-McGee's lax safety practices, which endangered Karen and many others working at the plant. From my research, I do not believe Karen intentionally contaminated herself, nor do I think Kerr-McGee deliberately did so. However, it's clear that the company's poor approach to employee health and safety was a significant factor. Plutonium was mishandled, and some employees even exposed themselves deliberately in order to be sent home, without a real understanding of the grave dangers they faced. Kerr-McGee failed in its duty to ensure the employees were aware of these risks. As for the conspiracy theories surrounding Karen's accident, I don't believe she was intentionally run off the road. The damage to the rear of her car could very well be a result of her previous accident. I've been to the site of her crash, and it remains much as it did in '74. Flat, straight, and bordered by farm fields. Under normal circumstances, someone driving off the road there would likely end up in one of the fields. Why Karen's car left the road remains a mystery. Perhaps she did momentarily doze off. Maybe she drifted while distracted, or was even accidentally clipped by another vehicle. It was a particularly windy night, and a strong gust of wind could have played a part in the accident. We may never know the exact cause. What we do know is that Karen was headed to meet a reporter from the New York Times that night, determined to share what she knew because she believed it was the right thing to do. Her legacy as America's first whistleblower remains a testament to her courage in standing up for what's right. After Karen's death, the Kerr-McGee Cimarron plant closed in December of '75, unable to secure further contracts. Her roommate Sherry passed away in November of 2012 at the age of 59, and her partner Drew died on June 14, 1995. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and may the truth reveal itself in the shadows.